may or may not be able to join us today. If he can, he's going to pop in whenever he can, and we'll just bring him on when we see him arrive. In the meantime, I've got a lot of great stuff to tell you about, a lot of, frankly, breaking news. I think you're going to find very exciting. And again, Ilya will join us if he can, and his apologies if he can't. We'll see how things work out today. So a couple of things I want to tell you just to get started here. One is just a half an hour ago, we got a link from the folks at Newsweek. They just published a great article about Ilya literally a half an hour ago. I just put a link in the chat. You can click that blue link there and take you right to the story. A really great interview that just happened this morning with Ilya, and they turned it around really quickly and just published it, as I said, about a half an hour ago. That's a really good setup for the next thing I want to talk about, which is I see a lot of folks here are new today. A lot of folks have been here with Ilya and I for a long time. There's going to be a big change with the show, and I hope you like it. I think you're going to. We're no longer going to do a show every Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern. Starting next Monday, we're going to do a show every day, Monday through Friday. Oops, I don't know if my wife is here. I haven't told her this yet. Guess I should have done that, huh? We're going to do a show every day, but it's going to be short. It's going to be 5 or 10 minutes long. It'll be at 4 o'clock Eastern. You'll get notified of this from BeamZ, but it'll be every day, Monday through Friday, at 4 o'clock Eastern. And the reason we're doing that is you may get this sense as well. So much is happening in Ukraine and in Russia and around the world relative to the conflict, relative to the invasion, that it almost feels like by the time we talk to Ilya, we're talking about things that have become kind of old news. So our thought is, let's make the show shorter, but much more in real time, so that every day he can pop on, tell us what happened today, what he sees as what's happening tomorrow. And then we all have this greater sense of really being involved and understanding and having context and, frankly, getting some background information and insight that is going to be much more relevant to us on a daily basis than it is on the weekly basis that we've been doing it. So we're very excited about that. You'll get the schedule will change at BeamZ. I would suspect that today or tomorrow they will cancel the previous Thursday shows, add the new daily shows, but please join us every day. We will archive those daily shows as quickly as we can. So if you miss a show, you can still see it. And of course, I don't know if Anna is here or not. Please share information about the show, the archive shows, or signing up for future shows with your friends and family so that we can continue to grow the show for the purpose of, frankly, supporting Ukraine and obviously supporting Ilya in the work that he's doing to make the kind of change that, well, a book like Does Putin Have to Die? The story of how Russia becomes a democracy after losing to Ukraine, to support the work that's going to be involved in making that happen. While I'm talking about this, I'm going to paste a link in for the show so that if you want to go and, just if you want to share it, I don't think you can sign up for the new dates yet, but if you want to share this with your friends and family, if you click that link, that is a web page you can share with anyone. And again, they can join us live starting on Monday at 4 o'clock Eastern, or they can look at the archive shows by going to the same page. So I was just talking about how, I know I don't need to say this, but I am going to use it as a way of setting things up for today. There is a big event happening in Warsaw from November 4th to November 7th. And Ilya is, I think it's fair to say, the primary organizer of this event. And I'm going to read to you a press release that's literally going to go out in the next few hours about this. I think you'll understand the significance of it as I read the press release to you. So it's called the First Congress of People's Deputies of Russia, again in Warsaw from the 4th to the 7th of November. Let me just read the press release to you. In the historic suburb of Warsaw, Jablona, and forgive me if I'm saying that wrong. The first Congress of People's Deputies of Russia will take place on November 4 to 7, 2022. The delegates are representatives of the Deputy Corps of Russia elected at internationally recognized elections of different years and different levels. Their common platform is their rejection of Russia's war against Ukraine, which began in 2014, not 2022, which began in 2014, and their readiness to change the socio-political system established in the Russian Federation. Jablona was purposely chosen by the organizers. The palace of the Polish Academy of Sciences in October 1988 was the starting point in the negotiations of the Round Table, which ended the Cold War and the complete dismantling of the totalitarian system, first in Poland and then in other Eastern European countries, and the transition of power in the hands of the Workers' Union Solidarity, or as many of us in the US, if you're old enough to remember this, we knew it as Solidarność. And to anyone here who's Polish, forgive my pronunciation, but it was a very, very significant and important event, not only in Poland, but around the world. And there were many, many people in the US who were watching during this solidarity movement. So let me go back to the release. The order of work of the Congress and its activities will be determined by the people's deputies gathered at the Congress, but the organizing committee of the event, for its part, proposes the following items for the agenda. Adoption of an act on the work of the Congress of People's Deputies, defining the legal basis for its work and its main objectives, and the following are bullet points. Adoption of the Declaration on the Constitutional Principles of Free Russia after the overthrow of the Putin regime. This declaration will become the foundation of the new Russian Constitution in the future. Bullet point number 2. Adoption of a list of priority decisions to be made by the post-Putin Russian government. And bullet point number 3, adoption of a National Resistance Act defining the procedure for the self-organization and legal framework for the resistance movement in Russia and abroad. I'm going to give you a link where you can basically see the same thing and share it, of course. And then let's talk about the relevance of this. I will do that, Jasper. Let's talk about the relevance of this in the context of the things we've talked about here on this show, and also the things that are in the book, because frankly, there's an entire book that was written, I would say, I mean, obviously I was part of the writing of the book, my name's on it. But when I saw this release today, I realized that all of this, all of the conversations we've had with Ilya, all of the work I did with him on the book, all of this is coming together in a way that becomes very, very tangible for the rest of us. I mean, I have to admit, working on this book with him, and I don't know how many of you have read it, I want to recommend that you do. I'm going to put a link in here now so that you can go take a look on it on Amazon. Hold on, here we go. Hang on. But even as I was writing this and having conversations with Ilya about it, there were many questions in my mind. Now, obviously, a lot of my questions got answered, right? I mean, I had to get them answered to help him finish the book. But I always had other questions. Truthfully, I wasn't even sure what the right questions were. I have been grappling with for months with how does this all come together? How do you, well, let me start at the beginning. I mean, the premise of the book is really that, as the title would imply, if Russia is not going to continue in the state that it is, and I think we all can agree that that is not a sustainable model for Russians or for the rest of the world. Clearly, it's the Russians' decision to make for themselves, but it wouldn't appear to us that this is a model that anyone would want to live on, a model or a system that anyone would want to live under. And so, it's not our decision what the future of Russia should look like, but we certainly can have opinions about it, and we can certainly voice our opinions about it. And so, with the title, Does Putin Have to Die? It does imply that there's going to have to be some dramatic change for that system to change. And in my mind, one of the things I literally lay awake at night thinking to myself, how does Ilya harness all of the pieces that must come together in order to remove a dictator and replace him with a new government? And so when you read the book, I mean, what it becomes very clear is that Ilya's vision is that the Putin government is removed by the will of the people. It is replaced by an interim government that serves for about 2 years. He proposes in the book that he is the leader or the president of the country during that interim period. I want to talk about that in a minute. I mean, when I discuss this with friends, they always ask me a question, which is, how do you know that the next new leader, whether it be Ilya or someone else, isn't just going to install themselves for life? And I think Ilya has come up with a brilliant approach to solving that dictatorial question. And so what he proposes is, by law, whoever that new leader is, and yes, he's proposing that that new leader is him, but whoever that new leader is, that new leader by law only serves for a specified period of time. He proposes 2 years. And in addition to the specified period of time, only serves for the purpose of writing a new constitution, new laws, new judicial system, setting the priorities for the new government in the country, and then having the first free and fair elections to elect not an interim leader, but the next leader. I'm going to say permanent, but obviously for the term of whatever that term is specified in the Constitution. So he has always seen as a role for himself the role of being that interim leader for Russia for a period of about 2 years to get a new constitution written. And he's got very interesting thoughts about that, which he talks about at length in the book. New laws, new judicial system, and leading the country to those elections. And what it's about in the book, which I found very important, is, these ideas for us in the West, they're scary. I think we're not accustomed to this. Certainly not in the U.S. In different parts of Europe, there has been more or less political upheaval. But as he points out in the book, and I think he does it very clearly, what he's describing here, there's pieces of it that are new or original pieces to add to the notion of how to change the government in Russia. But largely, it's based on the success of revolution in other countries. Just the word revolution, I think, for many people, at least in the US, is kind of a scary thing. But revolution, as he says in the book, is just a way of bringing about change. It doesn't have to be a violent revolution. It can be a peaceful revolution. He talks about examples of peaceful revolutions in the book. Does it mean it's going to be peaceful? You hope. Could there be some bloodshed? Yes. I mean, as he says, maybe there will be. But ultimately, the success of this change in Russia, he believes, should not be because some people around Putin decide Putin must go. So now we have to have a new figurehead running the government, a new dictator, probably. Or even that the members of the parliament decide there should be a new government and they have some way of removing Putin and putting in a new leader. He believes that must come from the will of the people. And the only way the people can make their will known, particularly in a dictatorship like Russia, with no freedom of the press and lots of other restrictions, so that freedom is restricted. The only way this can happen is for the people to take to the streets and demand change. And that change probably will come about in the form of what we call a revolution. So I have for many months been wondering to myself, how do you do this? You can't do it alone. That's talked about extensively in the book. You have to amass people around you. You have to wonder, what is the role of the West? Is the West, are we important? Clearly, we are. He takes his time out of his schedule every week to talk to us and to reporters like at Newsweek. He tentatively had an interview scheduled earlier today or later today with the BBC that's being rescheduled because of, there's massive events happening there as well, right? But clearly the West plays a role. And let's not forget, and again, this is discussed extensively in the book, that over the last 20 years, a huge number of Russians have left the country. That this was encouraged by the Putin regime. If you were unhappy in Russia or were prone to protest in Russia, you were encouraged to leave. So there's been this spread of Russians around the world. Well, how do you recreate a new country with a new constitution and new laws and a stable economy and a stable government when many of your best and brightest have already left the country? You have to bring them back. You have to bring them back to the country to well, there was a word I was going to say, and I can't think of exactly what it is, to pledge yourself again to the country and the new government going forward, your new country and your new government. And that is exactly what's going to happen in this first Congress of People's Deputies of Russia. If you're just joining us, I want to explain that Ilya may or may not be able to join us today. We're talking about an event. I'll put the link back in here. It's called the First Congress of People's Deputies of Russia. I see I actually spelled Russia wrong there, so I'm going to correct that. This is an event that was just announced a few hours ago that will take place in Warsaw. And I'm going to read again some of the things that will be discussed at this event. Essentially, this is an event in Warsaw at a historical place that played a key role in the dismantling of the, I want to use the right words here, the palace of the Polish Academy of Sciences in October 1988 was the starting point in the negotiations of the Round Table, which ended the Cold War. That's where this event will happen, where the Cold War, the beginning of the end of the Cold War occurred, and the complete dismantling of the totalitarian system, first in Poland and then in other Eastern European countries, and the transition of power in the hands of the Workers' Union Solidarity. So we are seeing today the beginning of what I think we can all hope is as dramatic a change for the world and the people of Eastern Europe, and specifically the people of Russia, as what we saw back in 1988, when in the exact same place it was, as this press release says, the starting point towards the end of the Cold War. So this event is being organized by Ilya and others. What they're doing, again, if you've joined us just in the last few minutes, they have invited, among others, Russian scholars, Russian constitutional scholars, and other academics, but most importantly, members of the Russian elected universe that were elected before the war began. And when I say before the war began, you've heard us say this before. The war did not begin in February 2022. It began in, I think, March is actually the date, 24 Crimea. So this is largely a gathering of people who were already elected in Russia by Russians who were always opposed to the annexation of Crimea in 2014, and obviously this current invasion that began in February 2022. And let me again read to you 3 bullet points from the goals of this Congress of People's Deputies of Russia, which will be held November 4 through 7. By the way, I'm not sure I mentioned this, but I will be there as well. So, adoption of an act on the work of the Congress of People's Deputies, defining the legal basis for its work and its main objectives. Here's the three main objectives. Adoption of the Declaration on the Constitutional Principles of Free Russia after the overthrow of the Putin regime. This declaration will become the foundation of the new Russian constitution in the future. Again, that is, frankly, the basis for the entire book that Ilya has written with my help. Bullet point number 2, adoption of a list of priority decisions to be made by the post-Putin Russian government. adoption of a National Resistance Act defining the procedure for the self-organization and legal framework of the resistance movement in Russia and abroad. This is that turning point that maybe you thought you would never see, or maybe you thought it might happen, but I won't know about it until after it's happened. I'll open my web browser one day and I'll read that, oh, look what happened in Russia. If you're old enough, you remember that that's what it was like in Russia back in the, when there was the shift to Gorbachev, and then again when there was the shift to Yeltsin. During those years, you would open your newspaper. We didn't have an internet yet. You'd open your newspaper and go, oh my gosh, look what happened in Russia. Only this time it's different. It's not, oh my God, look what happened in Russia. It's, look what I'm witnessing from the inside of what's about to happen in Russia. So I really wanted to share that with you. A lot of this is just becoming public and being announced this morning. So you're about as close to it as you can get. I'm hoping that Ilya can join us today and talk about it. That was really our goal. We'll see if he pops in and can do that or not. If not, obviously, we will be talking about this on Monday because, again, if you're joining us a little late today, we're making a big shift in the change of the schedule of the show. It will no longer be every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We will now start doing the show every day, every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern. The shows will be much shorter, 5 to 10 minutes. But the goal is for us to hear from Ilya, what happened today? What do you think about what happened today? What do you think is going to happen tomorrow? And then we end the show for the day, and then we pick it up the next day, review what we talked about from the day before, and think about what's going to happen in the future. So I hope you'll join us. And again, I will put a link to the show, although I'm not sure they have made the change to the schedule yet. But just so you have a link to the show. And if you miss any of those short daily shows, we will be archiving them. So when you miss one, that will mean, Jasper, we're not going to have an hour. We're going to have 5 to 10 minutes. So I agree with you. I always feel like we could talk for an hour with Ilya, but that's not how it's going to work. He and I are going to learn to get as much information out in a short amount of time as we can. And so, it's going to be a learning curve for he and I as well. And I do hope you'll join us. And again, the shows will be archived. So if you miss one or you want to share it, you have that link, which I just put in the chat box. So I want to talk about one other thing today before we go. I guess it's really a couple of things. Obviously, there's a lot of current events happening right now that are very relevant. There's martial law in part of the quote unquote annex zones of Ukraine. The Liz Truss just resigned from her position after a month. I'm not even sure how long she was in this position in the UK. And one of the other things I want to talk about, and I think this is really important for those of us, particularly in the US, the midterms are coming in a matter of weeks. In my state, North Carolina, early voting began today. Your state will be different. Every state has different early voting rules. I didn't know this until today, or I had to be reminded of it, I should say. But some states don't even have early voting. But I just put a link in the chat box of the rules about early voting in every state. You can click that link and go see it, see what the rules are in your state. I'm bringing this up today for a reason. As you've heard, or as you've probably heard, Kevin McCarthy, who's the House Minority Leader, is that right? I think so. I think he's the House Minority Leader, has basically said, with pressure from some inside his party, that if the Republicans take the House in November, in 3 weeks, that's going to be the end of what they call the blank check for Ukraine. Now, I know politics is often just creating sound bites. I mean, clearly there hasn't been a blank check for Ukraine. There has been an incredible amount of very necessary support, but that very necessary support may be severely curtailed should the Republicans take the House. I don't want to tell you how to vote. If you're a Republican, you do what you think is best. I completely respect that. I do want to encourage you to vote, and I do want to encourage you to think about, for every candidate you are about to vote for, do you know their position on things like supporting Ukraine? I think, there's many other issues. The economy is clearly an issue, but geopolitics has to also be an issue. And I don't think you can separate the two. Why are gas prices as high as they are? Could it have something to do with geopolitics? Absolutely. Why are food prices as high as they are? Could it have something to do with geopolitics? Absolutely. The situation in China, could that have something to do with your pocketbook? Absolutely. I just want to encourage you to look closely at the candidates you're voting for. This is one of those times where your vote will matter. So first of all, if you're on the fence about voting, get off the damn fence. Vote. 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 You owe it to yourself, your friends, your family, your community, and your country to vote. So get off that fence if you're on it. Whether you're going to vote Democrat, Republican, Independent, not my job or interest in telling you who to vote for. I just want to encourage you to look very closely at issues that matter most to you. And I have to assume that if you're here watching this show today, what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Russia matters to you. Otherwise, I don't think you would be here. I would think you would have other things to do. So please, please, please vote. Vote early if you can. Encourage your friends and family to vote. Encourage them to vote early. And I say vote early only because, you know what? When you vote early, you don't forget to vote. I will admit, there has been a time in my life where I slapped my forehead at 9 o'clock on election day and said, oh, damn, I forgot. We cannot afford to have you forget this time, ever really, but this time in particular. So make sure you know what your candidates stand for and get out there and vote, whether it's early or whether it's on election day, and make sure the people around you do the same thing. So I'm going to wrap things up for now. Again, I want to share some links with you. This is a story from Newsweek, that literally just hit the web and their website about a half an hour before the show began. This was an interview that Ilya did just this morning. I think it's a really great piece. I think that it did a great job. I'm sorry Ilya couldn't join us today. I know he wanted to. I want to encourage you to buy his book, because it's going to be a bigger and bigger part of the conversation as we go on. For instance, if you had read the book, and I know some of you have, hearing this press release that I just read about the Congress of People's Deputies, it would hit home in a way that it wouldn't if you hadn't read the book. There's so much context and specificity in the plan that Ilya illustrates in the book that is built right into this agenda that I read to you about this event. 2 other links I'm going to share with you. One is, again, the link for this show. Keep hitting it until we get the new schedule up there. It might take a day, but we will do it. And then, of course, the show with Thomas Nadrowski will continue to do that every Wednesday at 11 o'clock Eastern. And here's a link for that. Again, you can click these shows to see archives of each show. You can click these links and share them with others. And you can click these links to sign up for yourself. And the last thing I want to talk about is that pay button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It either says pay host or it has a $sign on it. I'm the host. I'm not being paid to be here. We have over time changed where the money for the shows has gone. Right now, every dollar we collect is going towards buying 435 copies of Ilya's book. It's going to cost about $10,000. And where those 435 copies will go is they will be signed, maybe while I'm with Ilya in Warsaw at the Congress, but they will be signed, and then they will be delivered to every member of Congress. So support us with that if you can. When you hit the button, it looks like this. You can give $2, you can give $7, you can give $1,000. Every dollar we collect will go towards this week and for members of Congress. And please, please share the link to the book with your friends and family as well. This increasingly, and I say that with even more excitement today than I would have said yesterday, this book is the roadmap to a new Russia. I can't tell you how gratifying it was for me to read this press release about the Congress and go, holy crap, that's the book in a one-page press release. They're going to talk about what Ilya, with my help, put into this book. It's really happening. It's happening now. And to answer your question, Jasper, the Congress is in Warsaw from the 4th of November to the 7th. And guess what? Next week, we'll do shows every day at 4 o'clock Eastern. And guess what we'll be doing from the Congress in Warsaw? Shows every day at 4 o'clock Eastern, and whatever that translates into 10 p.m. 10 p.m. every night while we're there, we'll be doing a show. So join us then. Join us on Monday. Thank you for paying for the show if you can. Thank you for being here. And I will see you on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Thank you again.